Welcome, dear friend. As we share these moments together, just as you are about to fall asleep, I will tell you the story of China's founding and its economy in the greatest detail. You are relaxing, drifting off to sleep, and I am accompanying you with extraordinary knowledge. Let us begin. Chinese civilization has two main cradles. In the north, the Yellow River, known as the Huanghe, and in the south, the Yangtze River valleys. Each gave rise to different agricultural traditions. In ancient times, civilizations took root beside rivers. River basins were fertile lands for building civilizations, much like the ancient Egyptian civilization flourishing in the Nile River basin. Around 8000 BC, the first agricultural communities are believed to have been established in these lands. Millet farming began in the Yellow River basin. This would remain the staple food of northern China for thousands of years. While millet farming spread across the north, rice cultivation developed in the Yangtze Valley. Tea and rice remained confined to the south for a long time. In other words, they did not become widespread in northern China for centuries. Around 5000 BC, Neolithic village communities began to form. This is called the Yangshao culture, and it began to spread around the middle reaches of the Yellow River. The ancient communities living here developed painted pottery, farming villages, and simple social structures. China is a very ancient civilization, and mythological creatures, like dragons, may date back to these periods. In Chinese mythology, the dragon is a wise creature. The Longshan culture spanned from roughly 5000 BC to 3000 BC, though the period between 3000 BC and 1900 BC was more complex. Black polished pottery, towns surrounded by rammed earth walls, the first signs of social stratification, and jade craftsmanship all emerged. This period laid the foundations for the transition to Bronze Age states. The Xia dynasty is dated to between approximately 2070 and 1600 BC. The Xia dynasty is the first dynasty in traditional Chinese historiography. The founding king's name was Great Yu, or Da Yu. According to legend, he was a hero who brought a great flood under control, but he left no written records. His existence was debated for a long time. The Early Tao culture in Henan, dating from approximately 1900 to 1350 BC, is associated with the Xia. Let us look at the details of life and economy at Early Tao. The first urban communities and bronze casting in northern China emerged here. Palaces were built on foundations of rammed earth. I wish I had the chance to see the structures built during that era, but of course this technique required a massive labor force. Cowrie shells, tin, jade, and turquoise were found in graves. This, of course, is cited as evidence of trade networks with neighboring regions. Society was highly stratified. That is, wealthy elites and workers who served them. Overall, agriculture was the foundation. Millet and wheat were the main crops, cattle and sheep were raised, and hunting continued. The Shang dynasty ruled from approximately 1600 to 1046 BC. The Shang dynasty is the first Chinese dynasty confirmed by written records. The last ruler of the Xia dynasty was Emperor Jie, known for his tyranny and extravagant lifestyle. Jie is described in Chinese historical writing as an immoral and cruel ruler. Jie was an extremely selfish leader who cared nothing for his people, was devoted to pleasure and excess, and was cruel. At that time, the Shang were a tribe within Xia China, but the tribal leader Shang who believed this cruelty had to be challenged, thought that Jie needed to be overthrown. As a result, Shang rose up against the tyrant Jie, overthrew him, and brought an end to the Xia dynasty. The Shang established dominance over the Yellow River Valley and expanded into Henan, Anhui, Shandong, Hebei, and Shanxi. The early Shang period corresponds to the dates between approximately 1600 and 1300 BC. During this period, the capital Zhengzhou was a major Shang city. It had massive rammed earth walls, 36 meters wide at the base, enclosing an area of 3.2 square kilometers. These walls required more than 10,000 people, working for over 12 years. Inside were palaces, bronze casting workshops, pottery and bone working workshops, and tombs. In the Shang dynasty, bronze production made a large-scale breakthrough from approximately 1500 BC onward. This was an enormous logistical operation requiring mining, refining, and transporting copper, tin, and lead ores. Official administrators supervised both workers and craftsmen. Bronze was used primarily for ritual vessels, weapons, and prestige objects. It was not used for everyday tools. In other words, it was a prestigious metal. The heaviest bronze vessels weighed up to 86 kilograms. Ordinary people grew millet, barley, and wheat. They did not drink tea, and they did not eat rice. Both belonged to the South. And as I mentioned earlier, they would not become widespread in the North until centuries later. Ordinary people ate grain breads and millet porridge and drank beer. The court, on the other hand, could vary their meals with meat and wine. Bone analysis shows that the Shang diet was largely beef-heavy. In the late Shang period, around 1300 BC, soybeans spread to northern China. With this, another important food source was added to the menu. Now let us look at the social structure of the Shang period. Think of it as a pyramid, a 5-tiered pyramid. At the very top, as is classic, were the king and the royal family. One tier below were the nobles and the warrior aristocracy. Below them were the craftsmen, bronze casters, bone carvers, and potters. These men represented a significant portion of the economy and were respected within society. One step down were the farmers, supervised by the king's vassals. At the very bottom were the dependent laborers. Now here, we need to draw attention to something. Some historians call the people in this tier slaves. But in Shang China, this definition is debatable. No reference to slavery or the sale of humans has been found in the oracle bones. By the way, oracle bones are ox shoulder blades or tortoise shells inscribed with writing, used during China's Shang dynasty to predict the future and seek answers to questions. Let us discuss them in detail. The oldest known systematic Chinese writing emerged on these bones. Ox shoulder blades, known as scapulae, or tortoise shells, were cleaned and polished, and grooves and pits were carved into them. In the ritual we call pyromancy, a diviner would insert a heated rod to create cracks. The direction of the cracks was interpreted to provide answers to the king's questions. The questions covered a wide range of topics: outcomes of battles, harvest predictions, weather, even the progress of a toothache. More than 20,000 oracle bones were found in the initial excavations. More than 80,000 are known in total. We can say that kings or diviners used them to ask ancestors or gods about matters such as war, harvest, weather, hunting, and illness. Let us talk a bit about money and trade. As you know, on this channel, We discuss economy and history while you drift off on your sleep journey. I love money, and I imagine you do too. Let us take a look at how trade worked during the Shang period. This is one of my favorite parts. During the Shang period, trade largely revolved around cowrie shells. These seashells were used as currency. Large quantities have been found in major tombs during excavations. In the tomb of Lady Fu Hao, more than 200 bronze ritual vessels and weapons were found. 600 small jade and stone figurines, ivory cups inlaid with turquoise, bronze mirrors, 500 carved bone objects, more than 6,880 cowrie shells, 16 sacrificial human skeletons, and 6 dogs. The trade networks of the people living in Shang China encompassed jade, turquoise, tin, and bronze vessels. Connections to distant regions existed. By the way, Lady Fu Hao was one of the wives of Shang dynasty ruler Wu Ding, and she is the earliest known female general, high priestess, an important political figure in Chinese history. Her tomb, discovered in 1976, is the only unlooted Shang royal tomb. Her name appears in between 170 and 180 oracle bone inscriptions. The last 9 kings of the Shang ruled from Yinshu, near Anyang, known today as the ruins of Yin. This is the richest Shang site archaeologically. More than 30 square kilometers of area, more than 80 structures, temples, palaces, workshops, and shrines. It is a major excavation site, an archaeological treasure. There were interesting customs in Shang culture. For example, they practiced systematic human sacrifice. Hundreds of sacrificial skeletons were found in excavations of royal tombs. Bone analysis shows that the victims had dietary traces different from the local population. They were most likely prisoners of war. When kings died, their wives, servants, guards, horses, and dogs were also buried alongside them. Around 1200 BC, light war chariots with 18 to 26 spokes per wheel appeared. They most likely originated in the Caucasus and reached China via Central Asia and the northern steppes. Initially, they served as prestigious command vehicles and hunting vehicles. 16 chariot burials were found in Shang royal tombs. In the Shang dynasty, these vehicles were used for various purposes. Excavations at Zhengzhou revealed workshop districts with functional division of labor. Bronze foundries, pottery workshops, bone-working workshops, and this will sound very surprising, but a bone-carving factory containing 40 tons of bone debris was uncovered. There were also silk workshops. In Shang China, silk production was carried out with controlled laborers for the aristocracy. From 1046 to 256 BC, China's longest reigning dynasty, the Zhou dynasty, held power. The Battle of Muye became a turning point for the Zhou dynasty. The first Zhou king, Wu, dealt a devastating defeat to the army of Shang king Di Xin at the Battle of Muye, overthrowing the Shang dynasty. King Wu secured his legitimacy through the mandate of heaven doctrine, known as Qianming. We need to talk a bit about this doctrine. According to this doctrine, heaven selects a single person to govern the earth and bestows upon him the title Son of Heaven. But if the king becomes corrupt and the people suffer, natural disasters and rebellions are considered signs that heaven has withdrawn its approval. In other words, the king can be overthrown. The difference from the European divine right of kings is this. In Europe, rebellion against the king was considered a sin, but in China it was a legitimate right. The king gave land to nobles he trusted and provided them with taxes and soldiers. Each state was organized around a walled city. In Chinese, guo means both state and walled city. The two were the same thing in reality. My friend, this somewhat resembles European feudalism, but there are differences. For example, instead of castles, there are walled cities. For example, Wuhan was separate, Beijing was separate, but they were all essentially subordinate to the king. There was no priestly class in this system, and movement between occupational classes was possible. For example, you are a craftsman, my friend, and you say, I am going to become a merchant, and you do. This entire system was called the Fengjian system. In this dynasty's era too, agriculture, millet wheat. Rice was confined to the south. Farmers lived in huts in summer and in adobe houses in winter. Metal currency did not yet exist. Cowrie shells were used as money. The upper class ate horse, chicken, cattle, pork, and deer. The best protein available to ordinary people was fish. Of course, back then, there was no whey, and those who worked out at the gym had a tough time. Jokes aside, ordinary people ate an extremely monotonous diet. Meals were either boiled in a vessel called a liandai or cooked in a steamer called a yan. In 771 BC, King Yu divorced his wife in favor of a concubine. In China during this period, this act was considered an insult to the queen's family. The queen's father was certainly not going to remain silent in the face of this insult. He formed an alliance with the nomadic Quanrong tribe and attacked King Yu. No vassal would come to the king's aid because of the disrespect that had been committed, and the king would be killed as a result of this attack. After this event, the Eastern Zhou began, and the Western Zhou ended. Kings began to become merely symbolic powers, and real power passed to regional states. In the 7th century BC, iron tools began to enter China. When the effect of the iron plow on the soil was seen, both agriculture and trade developed. Furthermore, alongside this, both cities grew and trade flourished. Although this was a period of chaos, paradoxically, it would witness China's greatest thinkers. For example, Confucius, Laozi, Mozi, and Sun Tzu are among the great men of this era. Due to years of relentless warfare, only 7 states remained out of hundreds. This terrible period of war ravaged the era between 475 and 221 BC. Here is an interesting piece of information. The Chinese produced steel more than 1,000 years before the West. Each state minted its own shape of currency. They took a very different path from the coins and tokens we are accustomed to today. Instead of using symbols on the currency for their representational qualities, they made the shapes of the money itself different. Truly fascinating. For example, knife-shaped currency was used in Qi and Yan, spade-shaped currency in Wei, Han, and Zhao, and round currency with a hole in Qin. This round currency with a hole later became the standard for all of China. Of course, the Qin dynasty's seizure of control over China played a role in that. In 256 BC, the Dujiangyan irrigation system was built, and this irrigation system is still active today. It has been working for 2,200 years. Incredible. Qin Shi Huang conquered 6 states in 10 years and unified China. He gave himself the title Huangdi, meaning emperor. This title had never been used before. He had chosen a title that would evoke the legendary authority of rulers. The greatest innovation of this period was that China was uniting for the very first time. Historians consider this the first unified Chinese state. With the unification of China, the writing systems of 6 different states were removed one by one and replaced with a single standard. The separate currency shapes of each state were also eliminated and replaced with a standardized round coin with a hole in the center. This coin was made of bronze, was round in shape, and had a square hole in the middle. It is called the Banliang coin. Weights and measures were standardized, and even road widths were standardized. Hold on tight. Even the wheel sizes of carriages were standardized. The greatest move of this era was standardization. The empire was divided into 36 commanderies, and cities were governed by centrally appointed officials instead of feudal lords. A population registration system was introduced. All men and women were registered by name with the state. Believe me, I cannot fathom how they managed to do this, but they did. The first major construction of the Great Wall was carried out during this period. That is to say, the walls of previous states were also unified. Emperor Qin Shi Huang was deeply afraid of death. It is believed that he drank a certain amount of mercury every day in order to find immortality. In 1974, in Xi'an, villagers digging a well made a remarkable discovery. They found an underground chamber filled with more than 8,000 life-sized warrior statues. Each one was produced with a unique face, hair, and clothing using assembly line techniques. Heads, torsos, and arms were made in separate workshops and then assembled. Originally, they were painted in bright colors, but the colors had succumbed to time. We call these the Terracotta Army. It was later understood that this was a tomb complex. It is said that there were rivers of mercury within the tomb complex. Modern tests have detected high levels of mercury in the tomb complex, and for this reason, the tomb has still not been opened. Perhaps Emperor Qin Shi Huang found immortality through this very means. His tomb never became a destination for grave robbers. No one was able to disturb him in his eternal sleep. It is believed that more than 700,000 workers were employed in the construction of this tomb complex. Qin Shi Huang was a cruel ruler and forced his people to work on the tomb complex. The emperor did this frequently and forced his people to work on many construction projects. He was extremely cruel to his opponents and had various tortures inflicted upon them. He had enemy prisoners hung on the Great Wall or hurled at enemies by catapult. He had books burned so that intellectuals would not question his rule. This move seriously damaged China's intellectual development. He imposed extremely heavy taxes on his people, and this caused famine and destitution. 1 year after Qin Shi Huang's death, rebellions began. The people were fed up with the cruel Qin regime and rose up, refusing to allow Qin's descendants to rule. The Qin dynasty completely collapsed. But the ascension of Hu Hai, his youngest son, to the throne also played a role in this, of course. Hu Hai is regarded as a weaker and more incompetent leader than his father. He was largely under the influence of Zhao Gao, which led to corruption within the court and great rebellions among the people. His reign lasted 3 years. As a result of escalating rebellions and palace coups, he was forced into suicide by Zhao Gao. Xing, who ascended the throne after him, was only able to rule for 46 days, and the Qin dynasty had completely collapsed. But its institutions were passed down as a legacy to the Han dynasty. The Han is the golden age of China. Today, the Chinese are still referred to as Han Chinese. This dynasty established the greatest cities of the era. Among these cities, Chang'an had a population of 250,000 and Luoyang 500,000. The agricultural system changed. A new system was introduced by the state. In this system, called Changping Kang, the state purchases grain during times of abundance and stores it in granaries, then releases it to the market during times of scarcity. Thanks to this system, prices are balanced. This is known to be the earliest price stabilization mechanism in history. It can also be considered a primitive form of modern central banking. In 138 BC, Emperor Wu sent Zhang Qian to the west. The reason was the search for an alliance against the Xiongnu and the Huns, but Zhang Qian was captured. He was held prisoner for 10 years, but escaped. He reached Fergana and Bactria. Although he was not diplomatically successful, the information he brought back enchanted Emperor Wu. Thus, a trade network stretching from Chang'an to Rome was born. Silk, tea, and porcelain flowed westward. Gold, glass, horses, and grapes flowed eastward. Buddhism also entered China through this route. In 105 AD, Kai Lun developed paper. The compass was discovered, though it was initially used as a fortune-telling instrument. In 132 AD, Zhang Heng invented the seismograph. This device detected the direction of an earthquake by means of a bronze ball dropping from a dragon's mouth into a toad's mouth below. It is the first seismological instrument in history. The accumulation of land by the wealthy and the dispossession of small farmers contributed greatly to the collapse. In 184 AD, Taoist sect leader Zhang Jiao organized hundreds of thousands of farmers, and the Yellow Turban Rebellion began. As a result of this rebellion, central authority collapsed. Between 220 and 618 AD, China once again headed down the path of fragmentation. During this period, the kingdoms of Wei, Shu, and Wu were constantly at war, and the economy collapsed. The Romance of the Three Kingdoms novel tells the story of this period and is one of the 4 greatest classics of Chinese literature. In the 300s AD, as a result of the Wuhu uprisings, the 5 barbarians, Xiongnu, Ji, Xianbei, Di, and Qiang, took northern China. The aristocracy fled south. Buddhism spread rapidly. War and suffering drove people towards spiritual consolation. Between 581 and 618 AD, the Sui reunified China for the first time in 300 years. During this period, a great canal was constructed. It was the world's longest man-made waterway, connecting the northern Yellow River region with the southern Yangtze by water. It is still in use today, but excessive public works projects and campaigns against Korea crushed the people. The Sui collapsed in 37 years. Its institutions were passed down as a legacy to the Tang. During the Tang dynasty, Chang'an became the world's largest and most cosmopolitan city, with a population of 1 million. Trade with Persians, Arabs, Turks, and Indians intensified in the Western market. The Silk Road was at its peak. Tea culture became national for the first time. Lu Yu's Classic of Tea is a work from this era. Porcelain became an international luxury commodity. Alchemists searching for the elixir of immortality noticed that a mixture of saltpeter, sulfur, and charcoal exploded. This is how gunpowder was discovered. It was first used as fireworks in ceremonies, but was later put to military use. Centuries later, it reached Europe through the Mongols. During this period, the examination system, known as Keiju, was expanded. Everyone who wanted to become an official had to take a written examination. The exam included subjects such as texts, poetry, and policy proposals. In theory, anyone with talent could become an official. This system lasted until 1905, meaning it endured for 1,300 years. Also, unrelated to the topic, but Galatasaray was founded in 1905. Let us continue with the subject. The Tang dynasty spans the years from 618 to 907 AD. After the Battle of Talas in 751 AD, they were defeated by the Abbasids. Captured Chinese craftsmen taught the Arabs how to make paper. Thanks to this, the first paper workshop was opened in Samarkand. In 845 AD, persecution of Buddhists began. More than 4,600 monasteries were closed. 260,000 monks were forced into civilian life, and their lands were confiscated. A massive economic redistribution occurred. In 755 AD, the Anlushan rebellion erupted. Anlushan was a general of half-Turkic, half-Sogdian origin. He rose rapidly thanks to his military abilities and is gaining the trust of the era's emperor, Xuanzong, and his famous favorite, Yang Guifei. He became the governor of 3 strategic regions and commander of a massive army. Due to political rivalries within the imperial court, particularly his enmity with Prime Minister Yang Guozhong, he revolted with his own army in 755. He declared the establishment of a new state called Yan. This rebellion was extremely devastating. It lasted approximately 8 years and caused an incredible decline in China's population, the plundering of the capitals, and the permanent inability of the Tang dynasty to ever regain its former strength. Some sources cite this period as one of the bloodiest events in world history. The Song dynasty period began between 960 and 1279 AD. During this period, some of what were probably the greatest economic transformations in world history took place. Some historians consider this the beginning of the early modern period. In 1024 AD, the world's first government-backed paper currency, the jiaozi, was printed in Sichuan. The reason for printing paper currency was that it was more practical than copper money. For example, copper coins were very heavy, and hundreds of kilograms had to be carried for a large transaction. Monetization was applied to taxes, meaning taxes were now paid with money rather than goods. During this period, nighttime curfews and market restrictions were lifted. Night markets, street vendors, restaurants, and tea houses, early examples of modern urban life, appeared during this era. With the recognition of the compass's importance, maritime trade exploded. Chinese ships reached Southeast Asia, India, and East African cities such as Mogadishu and Kilwa. The watertight compartmentalized ship design that emerged during this period was groundbreaking. Marco Polo said of Hangzhou, the most magnificent city in the world. Hangzhou, with a population of over 1 million, was the most populous city of this era. One of the wonders of this period was Bisheng's invention of movable type printing in 1040 AD. The examination system was expanded. It now had 3 stages: local, regional, and palace. Papers were evaluated anonymously and were rewritten to prevent cheating. Between 1271 and 1368, China came under Mongol rule. The Yuan dynasty was founded by Kublai Khan. The capital was Dadu, which is Beijing. During this period, the famous traveler Marco Polo came to China and established a close relationship with Kublai Khan. Paper currency printing accelerated. An inflation crisis erupted, and during this period, the Mongols were considered superior to the Chinese, meaning class discrimination was practiced. For this reason, it was a period of rebellions and unrest. The Ming dynasty spans the years 1368 to 1644. A peasant named Zhu Yuanzhang expelled the Mongols and established his own dynasty. During this period, Zheng He's 7 maritime expeditions took place. Ships measuring 120 meters were produced. This was 4 times the size of Columbus's ships. In the late Ming period, silver flowed into China from Europe, from Spain's American colonies. China had become the world's largest buyer of silver. Of course, this led to early globalization. The Qing dynasty, the last dynasty founded by the Manchus, spans the period from 1644 to 1912. In the 18th century, China was producing roughly 1/3 of global gross domestic product. The population exploded. In 1700, it was 150 million. In 1800, 300 million. And in 1850, it had reached 430 million. China was like the world leader in agriculture. It was planting new world crops in its soil and opening previously uncultivated lands to farming. However, it lost the First Opium War against the British between 1839 and 1842. This caused China considerable trouble, and they were forced to cede Hong Kong to the British. The Taiping Rebellion, which erupted in 1850, lasted until 1864. It is thought that between 20 and 30 million Chinese lost their lives as a result of this rebellion and civil war. This is one of the bloodiest civil wars in world history. In 1911, the Xinhai Revolution brought an end to the imperial system that had lasted for over 2,000 years. Sleep well, my friend.